Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And I think if we can be, well, let me put it this way. To me, mindfulness is the pause between what you want to say and what you do say. It's the pause between your initial reaction and then how you choose to respond.
Anne Marichek is an accomplished musician, teacher, and author. She was tasked with cleaning out her parents' home of 56 years. In doing so, she connected with childhood mementos and all the memories they brought, both good and not so good. And for Anne, it opened the door to healing her inner child. Her book, Unpacking the Attic, is a book for every one of us. It's about looking at our childhood through adult eyes and choosing understanding and forgiveness. Anne, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Hi, Pat. I'm thrilled to be here. I had a very profound experience when my parents announced they were moving into an assisted living apartment in 2 weeks. That's how much notice they gave me. And they asked me to empty their home and prepare it for resale. They thought I could do this in that 2 week period. Well, a little bit of an unrealistic expectation. This was a 3-story, 6,000 square foot home with 56 years full of accumulated everything.
Oh my God.
So, needless to say, this was, well, it took long enough to write a book. So, in the process, though, of helping my parents with this daunting task, I began to see items from my childhood being carried out of literally their attic for the last time, either to be donated or gifted or recycled. And it was as if the items from my childhood had an embodied energetic all of their own that was washing over me. And they were triggering suppressed childhood memories and traumas that I had long forgotten. And, honestly, it became close to a near death experience, but without the dying part, which was darn convenient. But it really brought my life into review and pointed out to me that I was still replaying a lot of negative self doubts, feelings of unworthiness, of being unloved, um, and some real negative self imaging that these childhood experiences had programmed into me. And it was calling into mind relationships within the family that were truly broken and needed to be healed. And it took me on a journey. And I began writing, just for my own healing purposes, a journal. And I began recording all of these memories as they resurfaced. And then taking it a step further, having the courage to really look at each of these memories, look at the underlying implications of how they had programmed my self-esteem or lack thereof, and really begin to give an adult perspective and maybe even more importantly, forgiveness to the adults that were in the scenario, so that I was rewriting these old narratives that were no longer serving me. I found that the retrospection is a very powerful healing elixir. And I think our society doesn't take enough time to reflect. We need that time to reevaluate a lot of our old childhood triggers and emotions and put them into the broader context so that we can move forward and heal. Sometimes you just have to look back in order to be free to move forward.
Oh, I think so too. And you can look back now with that adult perspective. which
Right.
is a much more multidimensional, forgiving perspective than what you experienced as a child.
Oh, absolutely. Um, it was interesting. I hired help to empty the house because it was just, even though I was there all day long every day for like months trying to work and unpack things and give things away, it was still just too much for one person. And this company had college hunks that came in and and helped me move the big items out and so forth. And on the very first day of having this moving company come in, one of these big strapping young guys came up to me and said, "Miss Ann, it's Corey." I'm thinking, I don't remember a Corey. And he's like, "You taught me piano when I was 7." And this big grin on his face. Well, he changed quite a bit. But, in that moment, I got this flash of seeing this little 7-year-old freckled boy with his little turned up nose trying to find the melody in that piano somewhere. And it triggered this ability to see the child within me as well. And I think that was the moment when each of the items that was being brought out of the house began to help me see and relive a lot of these childhood experiences that I had suppressed. I had long blocked and forgotten. So it's a journey, it's a healing process, and I think it's so valuable. As children, we're all little narcissists, right? It's part of survival. We think that we're the causation of everything.
That's so true.
hmm it's just part of the landscape of childhood. But so oftentimes, I'd say 99% of the time, it's not the child who is responsible or at fault for the circumstances they find themselves in. There is really a web of complex adult dynamics going on around them that they can't comprehend. And so, therefore, they interpret everything as, I'm a bad child.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that we always take a negative
Yeah.
evaluation of these circumstances? I
Yeah.
don't think we ever take a positive one, do we?
Well, I did draw on a lot of inspiration um, from childhood memories as well. I think actually it was probably a 50-50. It was equal. But I think it's when something traumatic happens, the
Mhm.
child will automatically go to the default of, I must have done something wrong to cause this. How can I be better? Or in my case, I translated many of these experiences as, I'm not worthy of being loved. So I think we need to revisit, allow ourselves to feel, because until we do that, we can't heal.
No,
Um,
I totally agree with you, and
yeah,
it's a difficult journey.
it can be, but it's also very freeing. It's also very rewarding. Um, let me give you an example. I only remember 2 words my paternal grandfather ever said to me, and that was sit down. And what caused me to remember was finding my grandfather's meerschaum pipe in the attic.
Wow.
It's a, let's see if I can get it in the screen there. It's a Turkish sultan, and it still smells of cherry wood smoke. And fragrances can really trigger memories. It's a very powerful trigger. And it called to mind the time when we visited him in his 2-family flat. It was winter. We came in, we took off our coats, and the only 2 words I ever remember him saying to me was, sit down. And he would point to that red velvet couch, and I would sit there frozen in fear while he and my parents would go into his kitchen. And as a toddler, it seemed like forever. I would smell cooking, I would hear laughter and conversation. And then, after an eternity of sitting there hungry, they would come back into the room. He would sit in his big green overstuffed chair and stare out that window and puff on this pipe and fill the room with cherry wood smoke. Now, all I ever wanted to do was sit in his lap, and he wouldn't even look at me.
Wow.
Yeah. So, in my toddler mind, I told myself, Pop doesn't love me. I'm not worthy of being loved. I'm a bad child. There's something wrong with me. I'm broken. Well, in repurposing these memories and trying to reframe them,
Mhm.
I remembered that my mother had told me that Pop lost his luster for life when your grandmother, his wife, died. Now, she died in her early 50s of diabetes. This was back, of course, before insulin or treatments. And I began to put those two things together. And I realized Pop was still in deep grief. He had no room in his heart for a toddler. So it really wasn't that I was a bad child, it was that he was incapable of letting me in. So reframing and giving some compassion and understanding to him really changed the narrative for me. And then I took it a step further. I wanted to heal from this process, and I wanted to try to heal this broken relationship that I'd always had with him. I tried to fix that relationship my whole life. I kept thinking, well, maybe when I get older, maybe he just doesn't like children. Maybe when I get older, we'll start to have a relationship and we can talk and connect. And I've always been a piano teacher. I used to take students to his nursing home to perform Christmas carols, hoping that him there and seeing me and having the kids perform and everything, we could finally have a conversation, right? He would leave the performance before it was over and go back in his room and shut the door and wouldn't come out and talk to me.
Why do you think he did that?
All I can think is that for some reason, he associated me with his loss. And now I was an infant when grandma died. I don't remember any of the circumstances surrounding that, but that's the only thing I could figure out was that perhaps there was some kind of emotional association between when I was born and when she died.
You
They
would
must have
expect
been
the adult
connected in some way.
you would hope
So,
that the adult in the room would step up, but there's been a real
yeah,
change between generations.
yeah.
I mean, our parents and our grandparents we're around the same age. Our parents and
Mhm,
grandparents'
mhm.
generations were really emotionally unaware.
Yes, very much so. Very shut down. And, I began to remember a trip my husband and I took to China. Now, stay with me. You'll
Okay.
see why China is important. And we were walking through these alleyways in Beijing, and there were vendors that had tables set up with what looked to me like stacks and stacks of paper dolls. They had pictures of new houses and pictures of cars and pictures of clothes and washers and dryers and all kinds of random stuff. And I asked our tour guide, I said, is this for children to play with? And he was like, oh no, families buy these for their deceased. He said, in our religion, we believe that when you pray with intent on an image of an item, excuse me, and then burn, light that item, that the smoke will rise to the spirit world and rematerialize as that item in the spirit world for the intended deceased. So they were gifting their relatives. Okay,
Wow.
interesting concept. Apparently, the vendors of Beijing have made an entire industry of this. But, I thought, I'm going to write Pop a letter, even though he'd been gone for decades. And at first, all I wanted to write down was how mad I was. I wanted to yell at him. I wanted to demand an apology, right? But as I meditated and I prayed over all of these facets, okay, all of this complexity, I ended up writing, I'm sorry you were broken.
Oh,
And we both deserved so much more. You missed out on one of life's greatest joys, and that is to laugh with your grandchild. But I understand and I forgive you. And I put that letter in a green ceramic bowl to represent his green overstuffed chair he used to sit in, and I lit it. And as that smoke rose, I had a flood of goosebumps and spirit and this feeling of compassion and unconditional love for Pop that I had never felt. I had always felt anger and resentment, and it was completely freeing. It released all of that old scenario that I am not worthy of being loved, that I'm rejected. And I think rejection is something that everyone has to deal with at some point in their life.
Absolutely.
We're all human. That's a universal hurt, right? And it transformed me. Now, did Pop read my letter in the spirit world? Well, who knows, right? But it allowed me to repurpose and reframe that whole memory so that now I am not triggered with that emotional rejection and hurt. Now I can have some distance between the emotion and the understanding of the situation and react to it with compassion toward the other people that were in that scenario.
Actually, there are a number of cultures that use burning a
Mhm.
letter or an intent as a way of releasing it. And
Yeah.
it's far more powerful than you would ever imagine.
I just did it on a whim. I thought, well, this kind of going to be kind of fun. Oh my goodness. The transformation within me was immense. It was very freeing. Now, not to say that everyone who does this is going to have the same experience, but I think if you open your heart to the possibility, you might be surprised.
Well, and also you've put all these emotions, these heartfelt feelings and hurts and
Yes.
forgiveness and everything else in this letter,
Mhm.
and then to just send it on its way.
Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Yeah, it was. For me, it was truly transformative. And that's just one of 50 chapters in Unpacking the Attic. That each chapter is a story that helps us to all relate to, I think, universally felt childhood traumas and emotions. We all feel rejection. We all probably have moments of abandonment.
Mhm.
We all experience humiliation
Mhm.
from peers mostly. We all have a sense of injustice. We know when we've been unjustly wronged. We have an innate internal sense of that. And we all experience betrayal. And even though the specifics of your life details will be different, those same 5 underlying traumas will be there. And so going on this healing journey and exploring each of those, I think is very valuable.
No, you're absolutely spot on about the commonalities in our experiences.
Mhm.
I see that in the podcast. I have the 30,000-foot view, and
Yeah,
there are absolutely common traits, common experiences that
sure.
come up again and again in totally different stories.
Yeah, because we're all experiencing a, a human experience, right?
Mhm.
And so within that framework, I think there's always going to be these commonalities. Um, One of the things too that I'd like to point out is, we were talking about the negative, but also the positive, the inspiration. Um, there have been many times in my life I've had really traumatic injuries, life-threatening traumatic injuries that I've had to push through the pain because there was no other option. And when I was 16, I'd had my driver's license for 2 weeks, and I was in a horrific car crash. My algebra teacher rear-ended my car at such a speed that it broke my neck. And this was in 1972, I believe. It was before headrests were in cars.
Mhm.
So that hit from behind threw my neck back so hard that it actually smashed the top vertebrae, the atlas. So to this day, I have no actual physical connection between my skull and my spinal column. It was smashed so badly it dissolved. Um, Very traumatic injury. They wanted to operate and put a metal rod down my spine and
Mhm.
to bolt my head into a halo to completely immobilize me. So I would have spent from 16 on like Robo Woman, right? Not an option. And I told my parents, if you force me to do this surgery, I will kill myself. I am not going to live from 16 on in that state. I'm either going to heal or I'm not. But that surgery is not an option. And miraculously, they relented and they let me go a different alternative healing path. And I went to the chiropractor every single day. I still go, not every day now, but I go still go once a week to keep things in place and aligned and to deal with the swelling and so forth and let it heal naturally. Well,
One of the themes that comes out of your book so strongly
uh-huh,
is your own personal perseverance.
yeah.
What do you think it is within you that allows you to take charge and not get mired in this woe is me victim mentality?
I think it's an innate understanding of the creative flow. I've always been a composer. I've always been a musician. My bachelor's and master's degree are both in music composition. And I've always had an ability to tap into what I call the divine creator, the universe, whatever your word, God, whatever your word is. But I seem to be able to channel this flow of creativity. And I've always had the sense that I was here as a conduit. I was here to give. And that goes for the writing of Unpacking the Attic, as well as my music compositions, as well as my YouTube channel. It's it's always been my innate soul's purpose, knowing that I was here to give. And so I always interpreted any challenge like that as, if I can go through this and come out the other side with an understanding and a compassion of what it's like to go through a painful, traumatic experience, I can then use that as a well of resource to help others. And I think that's truly having my eye on that horizon of knowing that there's a way through, and trusting and believing in the power of your body's own innate ability to heal itself, and your power of your spirit to tap into that universal creative source, I think is what always made me feel like I wasn't alone, that I was able to go through this dark path and come out the other side. I always focused on the light on the other side. I knew there would be another race to run. I knew that I would have more to give. I remember laying in bed with a cervical collar on my around my neck and just liquid fire of pain going through my body, and remembering my turtle from my grade school. So there's a chapter entitled, "Did I tell you about the turtle?" And we draw on inspiration on all kinds of interesting places. But in my grade school, the last day of school was always the school picnic. And they'd march us down this neighborhood street to this little Bernie park. And there were swings and so forth. But the big culminating event of the year was the turtle race. So every child at the school, it was our fervent desire to find a turtle before the last day of school. Well, my neighbor's dog seemed to understand this urgency, and the poor things would come home in his slobbery mouth, all froze shut in fear. And we would paint our little racing numbers on their backs with the fingernail polish color of our choice. But this one year, I didn't get a turtle from the neighbor dog, and I was just devastated. And Dad came home with a turtle in a box in the trunk of his car. The poor thing had been hit by a car and left to die. And its shell was cracked, and it actually had maggots eating on it on the inside. Poor dear. And we began to soak it in warm Epsom salts waters and hold it up, and the salt would make the maggots let go. And we were giving him droppers full of water and mealworms and liver pate and cherry tomatoes. He had quite the gourmet menu. And that turtle began to thrive and heal. And seeing, with exercise and good nutrition and time and patience, seeing his shell mend, seeing him completely heal, seeing him come out to play with us. He would try to swim in the water and he would be bright eyed and happy. And then at the school picnic, I had the only resurrected turtle in the whole school. And he would have won that race had he remembered which direction the finish line was in. He took off over there, but he was definitely the fastest runner. But I kept telling myself, remember the turtle. God gave that little creature enough will to live and enough spirit that he came through, he went through to the other side. He went through the pain and he lived to run races. And I thought, if the turtle has the perseverance and the strength to do that, by golly, I do too.
You're an extremely creative person. Do you think creative people are a little more in touch with their inner child?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think so. I always feel like the creative adult is the child within that survived. Because for me, my greatest joy and my playtime is when I'm creating something. So when I'm composing a new piece of music, I'm in ecstasy. I really am. That is, I lose all sense of time. I am just in this joy of the sound. I'm letting the emotion that I want to communicate through that music pour through me, and as my fingers play on the piano keys, the music just flows out. I will sit in gratitude. I will thank the universe, the divine soul, for the music, and I begin to hear it. And as I put my fingers on the keys, the music flows through me, and I write it down on the manuscript paper, one note at a time. And I start on note one. And when the music stops, when I quit hearing it, it's over. And I almost never go back and edit a single note. They're downloads.
Wow. Flow is an interesting state.
Mm-hmm.
And they always say that flow is part competency in whatever area you're working in.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you have to master a lot to go into music.
Right, you do. And I'm a concert pianist.
Hmm.
I have both bachelor's and master's degree in music composition, and I have composed since I was 5, so for decades. So, what begins to happen when your skill level gets to a certain point is that just becomes innately part of who you are. And then when the inspiration flows through you and that energy flows through you, all of those things are just on autopilot. So I know instantly when I hear a note, what note I'm hearing and how to write it down on the paper. I understand all of the technical aspects to the point where it's just part of the air I breathe. So that's freeing for me to be able to really get fully present in the creative process. I don't have to think about, oh, is that a quarter note or an eighth note? I mean, I just innately know exactly what I'm hearing. So preparation took decades. But now that that's all established and it's a part of me, oh my goodness, the joy that it brings.
I think as we go through life, anything, whatever, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, even if it's not what you want to be doing at the moment,
Mhm.
do it to the best of your ability
Yes.
because those skills and that experience will travel forward with you. Just like we were talking about earlier about having common emotions. Well,
Yes.
these skills, as you go through different stages and different jobs, have a lot of common elements. And as long as you are present
Mhm.
and doing what you're supposed to be doing, somewhere out ahead of you, there's a surprising way that all these things connect.
Right. And I don't think there's any coincidences. I think serendipitous things happen in a way that prepare you for life's later challenges and pleasures. So, even if it's a job that, like you said, that you don't see the relevance of it now, we don't have hindsight looking forward, only looking back, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
you can't connect the dots until you've been through it, and then you can look back and say, "Oh, okay, I see how that all goes together now."
Though I think as you're moving forward, the best thing you can do is be true to yourself.
Oh,
And
yes,
you wrote in
absolutely.
your book, this is a line I just love. The only one in life I want to impress for the rest of my life is my inner child.
Yes. Yeah, trying to impress anyone else is just exhausting. But, I do check in. I'll ask myself, was I fully present? Did I make a safe space for others today? Did I love unconditionally today? How am I doing, right? With the things that matter. Um, was I kind? One of my favorite quotes that I did put it in the book is from the Sufi poet Rami.
Mhm.
It says, let your words pass through three gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And I think if we can be, well, let me put it this way. To me, mindfulness is the pause between what you want to say and what you do say. It's the pause between your initial reaction and then how you choose to respond. You
Absolutely.
you need that time to say, okay, I'm being triggered. I want to respond in anger, but is that really going to be the best purpose? Is that going to serve me in this circumstance? Is that going to hurt the other person? You need to step back and evaluate instead of just always being reactionary. I think so many people are in this fight and flight stress
Mhm.
response all the time. We need to learn to take a deep breath and ground ourselves and be centered and then choose how we're going to respond rather than just reacting in the moment. That initial first reaction is 99% of the time not going to be your best friend. It's not going to service you well.
Well, having choice goes to simply being conscious.
Yes. Right, being present.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. I agree
And and it's
completely.
interesting. I found for in my life, one of the things that's real there are a number of things that have reinforced that sense of that gap,
Mhm.
as you say, that's so true. It's as if time just slows and extends,
Yeah,
and you have the ability to sculpt what happens in the next moment to the
you
degree
do.
that you can with your response.
Yeah.
And, there are a number of places I've experienced that, but
Mhm.
certainly meditation has really reinforced it.
Oh, definitely. And a lot of unpacking the attic, a lot of the ability to reframe a
Mhm,
lot of those experiences w- came to me through meditating on the memory and on the underlying emotion. For example, when I was little, I always had a profound sense of being treated unjustly by my extended family. Um, what pointed it out more than anything was Christmas Eve. We used to celebrate with the entire extended family at my father's older sister's house, my older aunt's house.
mhm,
Now, I was generationally in the gap. My my father's older sister, my older aunt, she had 5 children that were decades older than me and were having their own babies. Then there was me, and then there were infants being born to my father's younger sister. Okay, so I was an only child with no cousins generationally anywhere near me. So that was problematic in and of itself. But then when we would go to Auntie's house, everyone was in their own little peer group, and I was always left out. So I was in this swirl of chaotic activity with 50 people in the house by myself. And the dreaded time of the evening was what everyone else looked forward to. We would all go to the other side of the living room, and she had a Christmas tree set up with presents literally wrapped and stacked out to the middle of the room. And all of the cousins would squeal and scream and pile onto it, and paper was flying. I would walk to the back of the room and sit on a bar stool and study the painting of the flamingo dancer she'd brought back from Spain and contemplate on someday I will travel and bring back art for my own walls of my future because there was never a present with my name on it.
You're kidding.
No. Now, mind you, this isn't about getting presents, right?
Sure.
This is
It's about
about
being seen.
being seen, about feeling like you belong, about feeling like you're a member, a valued member of this family community. And I always felt this sense of profound injustice and, betrayal in this instance. And as I meditated on this, I began to realize that I was given the greatest gift of any of them, because all of those presents that were unwrapped under that tree have either been outgrown or broken or thrown away at this point, right?
That's true.
But I came away with the gift of understanding how important it is to be inclusive, how important it is to make everyone feel seen and everyone feel valued. And now, when I have any kind of celebration for people over for the holidays, whatever, I have a wrapped gift for them and with their name on it. And I go a step further. I make ceramic Christmas tree ornaments.
Oh.
And they take weeks to make, right? Because you have
Mhm.
to form the clay, it has to dry, you have to fire it in the kiln to bisque, then you have to glaze it, then you have to fire it again. And I always on the back write the name of the person in the year so that there is no doubt. They know that I thought of them, I planned for them, they're valued, and I gave up my time and creative energy to gift them. So I learned how valuable and how important it is to see each individual for their own worth and their own value and to make them feel seen. So that ability, that sensitivity to inclusiveness, I find is a great gift. And so sometimes I think the adversities we go through and the challenges that we go through are really gifting us with a way to see the world as not so self-centered, as a way to see the world in how am I impacting those around me? How am I showing love and inclusiveness and acceptance to the people that are within my world now?